the open road at night, a ribbon of asphalt, promising escape, adventure, solitude. But what if the places we stop to refuel, to rest, to briefly touch base with civilization, become the settings for our deepest fears? Prepare yourself for 3 true stories that will make you think twice before your next late-night pit stop. The digital clock on my dashboard glared 4:03 a.m., each digit a harsh reminder that I was far from the comfort of sleep. This hour felt both ancient and brand new, a liminal space where shadows dance and the veil between worlds seems thin. My recent breakup had forced a retreat back to my parents' place in rural western Massachusetts, a stark contrast to the vibrant pulse of Boston I'd grown accustomed to. The bustling city streets, alive with laughter and energy, now felt like a distant dream, replaced by the oppressive silence of my childhood home. Overnights at the local urgent care were my penance, the price I paid for a hasty lease agreement with the wrong person. The shift had ended an hour ago, and my stomach rumbled a protest against the lukewarm coffee and stale vending machine crackers that had sustained me. I could almost taste the greasy, hot bagels from the place I used to frequent every Saturday morning, their warmth and comfort now a distant memory. A bagel shop, bless its early rising soul, was my salvation. With a chicken sandwich and a sad-looking salad in tow, I made my way to the Shell station, a lonely beacon on the otherwise deserted stretch of highway. This gas station had always given me the creeps. The vast parking lot felt like an endless expanse, unnecessarily large, as if designed to accommodate phantom truckers and forgotten travelers. Overhead, the flickering fluorescent lights buzzed ominously, casting disturbing shadows that seemed to dance in the corners of my vision. Even during daylight, it rarely saw more than a handful of cars. Tonight, it was eerily empty, the silence pressing in on me like a weight. As I stepped inside, the familiar smell of stale snacks and cleaning products hit me. I approached the counter, where an indifferent clerk glanced up from his phone, barely acknowledging my presence. I fumbled with my cash, trying to count out the exact change, while the clerk sighed audibly, clearly impatient with my presence. The atmosphere felt thick, suffocating, as if the walls were closing in, and I couldn't shake the sensation that I was being scrutinized. After what felt like an eternity, I exited the store, clutching my meager dinner. The night air was cool against my skin, a stark contrast to the warmth of the store. As I walked back to my car, I noticed a blue sedan had pulled up to a pump a few spaces down. A man emerged, his features obscured by the low light, and began fueling his vehicle. He seemed out of place, his movements too deliberate, almost rehearsed, like a predator assessing its prey. I slid my card, selected the grade of gas, and began the monotonous task of filling my tank. That's when he started walking over. "Want to see a funny trick?" he asked, his voice raspy, like sandpaper on wood. My internal alarms blared. Every instinct screamed at me to politely decline, to feign deafness, to simply disappear into the pre-dawn mist. But something, a morbid curiosity, a desire to avoid confrontation, sheer exhaustion, kept me rooted to the spot. "What's the trick?" I asked, the words feeling like lead in my mouth, heavy with apprehension. He launched into that grade school classic, the finger pulling off illusion. He looked down at his hands, feigning intense concentration, then flicked his gaze up at me, a strange, almost mocking expression on his face. The absurdity of it all was unsettling, a stark contrast to the dread simmering in my gut. It was so stupid, so childish, and yet it made my skin crawl. As he continued with his antics, I tried to force a laugh, hoping to signal my disinterest and send him on his way. But he persisted, repeating the trick, his eyes never leaving mine. The silence of the gas station, broken only by the hum of the pumps and the distant drone of a passing car, amplified the unsettling nature of the encounter. Each repetition of his trick felt like a countdown, a ticking clock urging me to escape. I noticed the way he stood, slightly hunched, as if waiting for something or someone. He had an unsettling intensity, and for a moment I wondered if he was even aware of how strange he appeared. I wanted to turn away, to ignore him, but my feet felt glued to the pavement. Finally, the blessed click of the gas nozzle broke through the tension. My tank was full. I quickly replaced the nozzle and practically sprinted inside for my change, desperate to escape the man's unsettling gaze. I could feel his eyes boring into my back, and a chill ran down my spine. When I emerged, he was gone. The blue sedan remained, the gas hose still snaked into its tank, but the man had vanished. A wave of unease washed over me. I scanned the shadows, half expecting him to materialize from behind a dumpster or from within the darkened convenience store. The emptiness around me felt suffocating, as if the very air was thick with unspoken dread. I jumped into my car, locking the doors with a thunk. Paranoia gnawed at me. I twisted in my seat, peering into the back, half expecting to see him lurking there. The back seat was empty, save for a discarded jacket and a pile of CDs. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, mocking my attempts to rationalize the situation. The drive home was a blur of anxiety. Every set of headlights in my rearview mirror felt like a threat, every sound magnified in the quiet of the night. I strained my eyes, searching for the telltale blue of the sedan, but saw nothing. My mind raced with possibilities. What if he followed me? What if he had sinister intentions? I gripped the steering wheel tightly, willing my heart to calm, but it only quickened in response to my racing thoughts. Finally, I reached my parents' house, the familiar, if temporary, sanctuary. I retrieved the spare key from its hiding place, a foolish tradition I'd always questioned, and let myself in, locking the door behind me with a sense of finality. The quiet of the house enveloped me like a heavy blanket, but it was a comfort I desperately needed. The house was silent, the only sound the gentle hum of the refrigerator. I crept into the kitchen, eager to devour my lukewarm chicken sandwich, but my appetite had vanished. I could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on me, thick and suffocating. As I sat at the table, the silence was shattered by the unmistakable sound of a key turning in the front door. My blood ran cold. "Mom? Dad?" I called out, my voice barely a whisper, echoing against the stillness. No response. No footsteps. Just silence. I crept to the foyer, peering into the darkness. The front door was slightly ajar, a sliver of blackness cutting through the dim light. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a reminder that I was not alone. Someone was in the house. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. Every instinct told me to run, to flee back into the safety of the night, but my legs felt like lead. I stood frozen, my breath caught in my throat, straining to hear any sound that might confirm my fears. A creak of the floorboards? A whisper in the dark? Nothing. Desperately, I searched for my phone, my fingers trembling as I fumbled in my pocket. It felt like an eternity before I found it, the screen lighting up my shaking hands. I glanced toward the door again, feeling the oppressive weight of the darkness pressing in around me. I had to know. Summoning every ounce of courage, I took a tentative step forward, inching toward the open door. The shadows flickered, and I could have sworn I saw a figure move just beyond the threshold. My heart raced, pounding in my ears. Was it just my imagination, or was there truly someone waiting for me in the dark? If this has piqued your interest, be sure to hit that like button and share this video with your friends. You won't want to miss the chilling events that unfold next. The darkness seemed to swallow me whole as I stood at the threshold, the weight of silence pressing down like a heavy fog. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing in the stillness. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, an unsettling sensation that crawled under my skin, igniting every instinct to flee. "Mom? Dad?" I called out again, my voice trembling. The air was thick with tension, and I strained to listen for any reply, any indication that my family was home. But the only sound was the distant hum of the refrigerator, an indifferent reminder of my solitude. I took a cautious step into the foyer, the floorboards creaking beneath my weight, and peered into the dimly lit living room. Shadows danced along the walls, cast by the faint glow of the streetlight filtering through the curtains. I scanned the room, searching for any sign of movement, but it remained eerily still. My mind raced, conjuring images of the figure I had felt lurking in the gas station. What if he had followed me? What if he was waiting for me here, in this very house? I shook my head, trying to dispel the thoughts that threatened to spiral out of control. I was letting my imagination run wild. Yet, the unease lingered, coiling around me like a serpent. I moved deeper into the house, each step feeling like an act of defiance against the encroaching darkness. The familiar layout of the home felt foreign now, every shadow holding secrets, every corner a potential hiding place for an unseen menace. As I reached the living room, I noticed the family portraits hanging on the walls, their faces frozen in smiles that felt grotesque in the current atmosphere. My parents, my younger self, innocent and carefree, stared back at me, oblivious to the tension that filled the air. The warmth of nostalgia clashed with the chill of fear, creating a dissonance that left me feeling vulnerable. I stepped further into the room, glancing toward the staircase that led to the second floor. The hallway above was dark, an inky black void that seemed to beckon me forward. A wave of dread washed over me as I imagined what could be waiting up there. My parents had always told me stories about the old house, whispers of strange noises and fleeting shadows. Had something awakened in their absence? My thoughts raced to the man at the gas station. What if he was inside? I felt the urge to call the police, but the thought of dialing the number paralyzed me. Instead, I moved toward the kitchen, hoping to find a weapon, a knife, a heavy object, anything that could provide a sense of safety. The kitchen was dimly lit, the soft glow of the overhead light flickering as if struggling against the darkness. I fumbled through the drawers, my hands shaking. "Focus," I whispered to myself. "Just find something." After what felt like an eternity, I finally grasped a sturdy kitchen knife, its blade gleaming ominously in the light. Holding it tightly, I felt a surge of confidence, but it was quickly overshadowed by a looming sense of dread. I was still alone, still vulnerable. I returned to the living room, knife in hand, and took a deep breath. I needed to confront whatever was in the house. The shadows seemed to close in on me, thickening with every passing moment. I crept toward the staircase, each step echoing in the silence. As I reached the bottom step, I paused, straining to hear any sign of movement from above. The house was unnaturally quiet. I could feel my heart racing, a primal instinct warning me that I was not alone. "Mom? Dad?" I called one last time, my voice barely a whisper. No response. With a surge of determination, I ascended the staircase, every step feeling like a journey into the unknown. The wood creaked beneath my feet, and I could feel the chill of the air wrapping around me, seeping into my bones. As I reached the top, I turned toward the hallway, its darkness more pronounced than ever. I hesitated, gripping the knife tighter. Taking a deep breath, I moved forward, my heart pounding in my chest. The hallway stretched out before me, lined with doors leading to my parents' bedroom, the bathroom, and my old room. Each door felt like a gateway to the unknown, a potential source of danger. I approached my parents' bedroom first, the door slightly ajar. Peering inside, I saw the bed neatly made, the curtains drawn tight. There was no sign of a struggle, no indication that anyone had been there. Still, the unease gnawed at me, and I felt like a trespasser in my own home. Next, I moved to the bathroom. The door creaked open, revealing a scene that felt both familiar and foreign. Everything was in its place. The towels hung neatly, the toothbrushes lined up, but the silence was deafening. I glanced at the mirror, half expecting to see a reflection that wasn't my own. But it was just me, pale and wide-eyed, clutching a knife like a lifeline. Finally, I turned to my old room. The door was closed, a barrier between the safety of the hallway and the potential horrors that lay beyond. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. This room had held my childhood, my dreams, my fears. What if something had taken residence within its walls? With a deep breath, I pushed the door open. The hinges creaked ominously as the door swung wide, revealing the room bathed in darkness. I stepped inside, the air thick with dust and memories. The bed was unmade, remnants of my teenage years scattered across the floor, old clothes, books, and posters peeling from the walls. But something was off. A low, almost imperceptible sound resonated from the corner of the room. I snapped my head toward the source, heart racing. It was faint, a soft whisper that sent chills down my spine. I strained to listen, but the words were indistinct, drowned out by the rapid beating of my heart. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling as I gripped the knife tighter. The whispering faded, replaced by an unsettling silence that enveloped the room. I took a cautious step forward, every instinct screaming at me to turn and run. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from downstairs, shaking me to my core. Panic surged through me as I spun on my heel, dashing out of the room and down the hallway. I sprinted toward the staircase, adrenaline pumping through my veins. The knife felt heavy in my hand as I barreled down the steps, each footfall echoing like thunder. As I reached the bottom, I paused, listening intently. The house was alive with sound now, creaks and groans, whispers in the walls. I peered into the living room, heart pounding in my chest. The front door stood wide open, swaying gently in the night breeze. "Mom! Dad!" I shouted, my voice breaking. The only response was the howling wind outside, a mournful wail that echoed through the empty house. I stepped cautiously into the living room, the shadows stretching and twisting in the corners of my vision. That's when I noticed something on the floor, a dark shape that seemed out of place. I moved closer, my breath caught in my throat. It was my father's jacket, crumpled and discarded near the open door. A wave of panic washed over me. Where were they? Why had they left the door open? I rushed to the door, peering into the darkness beyond. The street was empty, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the wind. I stepped outside, the cool air hitting my face like a slap. "Mom! Dad!" I called again, desperation creeping into my voice. The silence was deafening. I felt a chill run down my spine, and my instinct screamed at me to retreat. Just as I was about to step back inside, I noticed a figure at the end of the street, partially obscured by shadows. My heart raced as I squinted, trying to discern if it was a trick of the light or something more sinister. "Mom? Dad?" I called, my voice trembling. The figure moved slightly, and I felt a jolt of recognition. It was my mother. Relief flooded through me, but it was quickly replaced by confusion. She stood there, stock still, her back turned to me. "Mom!" I shouted, rushing down the steps. "What are you doing out here?" But she didn't respond. Instead, she remained motionless, as if caught in a trance. I felt a knot of fear tighten in my stomach as I approached her. "Mom, are you okay?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. As I got closer, I noticed something was off. Her posture was rigid, and her hair swayed gently in the breeze, but her head remained turned away. I reached out a hand, hesitating just before touching her shoulder. "Mom," I urged, panic rising within me. In an instant, she turned to face me, her eyes wide and unblinking. But it wasn't her gaze that sent chills down my spine. It was the look of sheer terror etched across her face. "Run!" she gasped, her voice hoarse and strained, barely above a whisper. "Get out of here!" Before I could respond, she spun away, bolting down the street into the darkness, leaving me standing there, frozen in shock. I felt a surge of confusion and fear. "Mom, wait!" I yelled, instinctively starting to chase after her, but something held me back, an overwhelming dread that rooted me to the spot. I turned back toward the house, feeling the weight of the night pressing down on me. The shadows seemed to swirl and shift, closing in around me. I could feel a presence lurking just beyond the edge of the light, watching and waiting. The whispers from earlier returned, louder now, a cacophony of disembodied voices that filled my ears. "Get inside," a voice hissed, and I felt a rush of fear wash over me. I stumbled backward, my instincts screaming for me to retreat into the safety of the house. With a surge of adrenaline, I dashed toward the open door, heart pounding in my chest. I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it, breathing heavily as I leaned against it for support. The house felt alive, the walls vibrating with an energy I couldn't comprehend. I glanced around the living room, searching for anything that could help me make sense of what was happening. The knife, still clenched tightly in my hand, felt like a flimsy shield against the unknown. I needed to find my parents, to understand what had just happened. Suddenly, a loud thump echoed from upstairs, jolting me from my thoughts. I froze, listening intently. The sound came again, followed by a series of hurried footsteps. Panic surged through me. I had to confront whatever was in the house. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. I couldn't allow fear to paralyze me. I had to find my parents and uncover the truth behind this nightmare. With the knife still in hand, I made my way to the staircase, each step filled with trepidation. As I reached the top, the noise intensified. A frantic rustling, like something or someone was moving through the rooms. It was coming from my parents' bedroom. Summoning every ounce of courage, I approached the door, heart racing. I could hear hushed voices now, a mixture of panic and urgency. The door was slightly ajar, and I peered inside, bracing myself for whatever awaited me. What I saw sent my mind reeling. My parents were there, but they were not alone. A shadowy figure loomed over them, its features indistinct, but radiating an aura of malevolence. My father was struggling against it, while my mother stood frozen, her eyes wide with terror. "Get away from them," I shouted, brandishing the knife as I burst into the room. The figure turned, and my blood ran cold. It was the man from the gas station, his face twisted into a grotesque smile. Ah, the little bird returns to the nest. he taunted, his voice dripping with mockery. I felt a surge of fury and fear as I lunged forward, knife raised. "Let them go!" I screamed, but he merely chuckled, an unsettling sound that echoed around the room. "Such bravery," he sneered. "But you're too late. This family has been marked, and tonight is the night it all ends." Before I could react, he waved a hand, and an unseen force slammed into me, sending me sprawling to the floor. The knife slipped from my grasp, clattering out of reach. I scrambled to my feet, my heart racing. But the figure had turned his attention back to my parents, who were now struggling against an invisible force. "Stop!" I yelled, desperation flooding my voice. "Let them go." But my pleas fell on deaf ears. The man moved closer to my mother, his expression twisted with delight. "You should have listened to her," he hissed, pointing a long, bony finger at me. "Now you'll join them in the darkness." I felt a surge of panic as dread washed over me. I had to fight back, to save my family. I lunged toward the man, but he simply sidestepped, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "You think you can stop me?" He laughed, the sound echoing in the small room. I glanced around frantically for something, anything, that I could use as a weapon. My eyes fell on a lamp on the bedside table. Without thinking, I grabbed it and swung it at him with all my strength. The lamp struck him, but instead of shattering, it passed through him like he was made of smoke. He let out a chilling laugh, and I felt my heart drop. This was no ordinary man. He was a force of darkness, a creature of nightmares. With a surge of determination, I dashed toward my parents, who were still struggling against the invisible force. "Mom, Dad, fight him," I shouted, willing them to break free from whatever held them captive. But their faces were pale, their eyes wide with terror. It was as if they were trapped in a nightmare, unable to wake up. I needed to reach them, to pull them back from the brink. "Stay away from them," I screamed, hurling the lamp at the figure again. This time, it connected with a loud crash, but he merely staggered back, unfazed. "Foolish child," he sneered, his eyes narrowing. "This is beyond you." Suddenly he raised his hand, and a wave of energy surged through the room, knocking me back against the wall. I gasped, struggling to catch my breath as pain radiated through my body. "Enough of this," he roared, his voice echoing with unnatural power. "You will pay for your defiance." I felt a rush of cold air as he advanced toward me, darkness swirling around him like a living shadow. Panic clawed at my throat, and I searched desperately for an escape. My parents were still trapped, their faces contorted in fear, and I couldn't leave them behind. With a burst of adrenaline, I pushed myself off the wall and lunged for the figure, determined to confront this nightmare head-on. "Get away from my family," I shouted, my voice filled with defiance. I could feel the energy crackling in the air as I charged at him, but he merely laughed, the sound chilling to the core. "You're brave, I'll give you that," he said, "but bravery won't save you." Just as I reached him, he raised his hand, and a blinding flash of light erupted from his palm, engulfing the room in a searing brilliance. I shielded my eyes, feeling the heat wash over me. The light was blinding, and I stumbled back, disoriented. When the light faded, I found myself standing alone in the middle of the room. My parents were gone. The figure had vanished, leaving behind an oppressive silence that hung heavily in the air. Panic surged through me as I spun around, desperately searching for any sign of them. "Mom! Dad!" I called out, my voice echoing against the walls. But there was no response, only the haunting silence of the empty house. Tears filled my eyes as despair washed over me. I had failed to protect them. I sank to my knees, the weight of my fear crashing down like a tidal wave. The darkness had taken them, and I was powerless to stop it. But I couldn't give up. I wouldn't allow this darkness to claim my family without a fight. With renewed determination, I pushed myself to my feet, wiping away my tears. I had to find them. I had to confront the malevolent force that had invaded our home. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill my lungs. My heart raced, but I knew I had to be strong. I couldn't let fear paralyze me. I would find a way to save my parents and banish this darkness once and for all. As I stepped out of the room, I felt a shift in the air, a subtle change that sent shivers down my spine. I moved toward the staircase, my senses heightened, ready to confront whatever awaited me. Each step felt like a journey into the unknown, but I was determined to fight. I would uncover the truth, confront the darkness, and bring my family back home. The nightmare is only just beginning. If you're on the edge of your seat, drop a comment and let me know what you think is going to happen next. The air was thick with tension as I descended the staircase, each step feeling like a plunge into the abyss. The darkness seemed to pulse around me, alive with hidden dangers, whispering secrets of the night. My heart raced, a drumbeat of fear and resolve, as I moved toward the living room, determined to confront whatever awaited me. The shadows clung to the corners of the house, twisting and shifting as if they had a mind of their own. I felt the oppressive weight of the silence pressing down on me, a reminder of the void left by my parents' absence. I will find you, I whispered to myself, a mantra against the encroaching dread. I will bring you back. As I entered the living room, I scanned the space for any sign of movement. The front door stood wide open, the wind rustling the leaves outside, but there was no sign of life within the house. I moved cautiously, my senses heightened, searching for any clue that could lead me to my parents. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from the kitchen, sending a jolt of adrenaline through my veins. I froze, heart pounding in my chest. What was that? I whispered to myself, the words barely escaping my lips. The growl was followed by a series of soft, scuffling noises, as if something was moving just beyond my line of sight. With renewed determination, I stepped toward the kitchen, gripping the knife tightly in my hand. The shadows pooled in the corners, and I could feel the cold air wrapping around me like a shroud. Each breath I took felt labored, the weight of fear pressing down on my chest. As I reached the threshold of the kitchen, I peered inside. The space was dimly lit, the overhead light flickering ominously. My eyes darted around, searching for the source of the noise. The dishes were neatly stacked, and the countertops were devoid of any clutter. But there was something off, an unsettling energy that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Then I saw it, a dark shape slinking across the floor, moving swiftly and silently. My heart raced as I stepped back instinctively, but I couldn't let fear control me. I had to confront whatever it was. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and moved further into the kitchen. "Show yourself," I shouted, my voice trembling but resolute. The shape froze, and I felt a rush of adrenaline as I prepared for whatever was about to happen. Slowly, the figure emerged from the shadows, revealing itself to be a small, scruffy dog, its fur matted and dirty. Relief washed over me, momentarily dulling the tension. "Oh, it's just you," I breathed, feeling a wave of emotion wash over me. The dog looked up at me with wide, frightened eyes, and I could see the anxiety reflected in its gaze. "Where are they?" I murmured, crouching down to the dog's level. "Have you seen my parents?" It whined softly, inching closer, as if sensing my distress. I reached out a hand, allowing it to sniff me before gently petting its head. For a brief moment, the warmth of the animal's presence calmed my racing heart. But the comfort was fleeting. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. The shadows seemed to deepen, closing in around me, and I knew I couldn't linger. I stood up, determination flooding back into my veins. "We need to find them," I said to the dog, feeling an unexpected bond forming. It seemed to understand, its tail wagging slightly, as if encouraging me onward. I turned back toward the living room, ready to search for any signs of my parents. As I walked through the house, the whispers returned, weaving in and out of my consciousness, a haunting chorus that filled the air. "They're gone," one voice hissed. "You'll never find them." I shook my head, pushing the thoughts aside. "No, I won't give up," I shouted, the words echoing through the empty halls. The dog barked in response, as if rallying behind my resolve. Together, we moved through the house, searching every nook and cranny for signs of life. We checked the bathrooms, the bedrooms, and even the basement, but each room was empty, a chilling reminder of the void left behind. The shadows loomed larger, and I felt the weight of despair creeping back in. Every moment that passed felt like an eternity, and I couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Then, as we reached the bottom of the stairs again, I noticed something glinting in the corner of my eye. I turned, my heart racing as I approached the living room window. There, outside, a figure stood shrouded in darkness, partially obscured by the shadows. My breath caught in my throat as I squinted, trying to make out who it was. "Mom?" I called out, my voice trembling. The figure turned slightly, and I felt a surge of hope. But as I stepped closer to the window, the figure melted away into the night, disappearing like smoke. "No, come back!" I shouted, panic flooding my veins. I raced toward the door, throwing it open and stepping outside into the cool night air. The dog followed closely behind, its presence a comforting reminder that I wasn't completely alone. "Where did you go?" I called out into the darkness, scanning the street for any sign of my parents. "Mom, Dad!" My voice echoed through the stillness, but the only response was the rustle of leaves in the wind. I felt a sinking sensation in my stomach, dread coiling tighter around my heart. The shadows stretched before me, more pronounced now, as if they were alive, watching, waiting for me to falter. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. I couldn't succumb to despair. Not now. As I turned to head back inside, the dog suddenly perked up, its ears twitching. It sniffed the air, a low growl rumbling in its throat. I followed its gaze, squinting into the darkness. Then I saw it. A flicker of movement at the edge of the yard, a shadow darting just beyond the trees. "Hey, who's there?" I shouted, my voice firm. The figure paused, almost hesitating, before vanishing into the underbrush. My heart raced as I took a step forward, feeling the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. The dog barked, snapping me out of my thoughts. I turned to it, my mind racing with possibilities. "Do you think it's them?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The dog seemed to sense my urgency, its tail wagging as it urged me forward. With newfound determination, I followed the dog toward the edge of the yard, heart pounding in my chest. The shadows of the trees loomed above us, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I pressed on, driven by the need to find my family. As we reached the tree line, I paused, scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The woods were thick with shadows, and the air felt charged with an unsettling energy. "We can do this," I whispered to the dog, who looked up at me with trusting eyes. Just as I was about to step into the woods, a low growl erupted from the depths of the trees, freezing me in my tracks. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, but the thought of my parents kept me rooted. "Mom! Dad!" I called again, desperation creeping into my voice. The growl intensified, echoing through the night. I felt a surge of fear, my heart racing as I took a step back. "What's out there?" I whispered, feeling the weight of the darkness closing in around me. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught my eye, and I turned just in time to see a shadowy figure darting between the trees. My breath caught in my throat. It was the man from the gas station, his presence a sinister reminder of the darkness that had invaded my life. "Stay back," I shouted, brandishing the knife again, feeling a surge of adrenaline. "What do you want?" He stepped forward, emerging from the shadows. His face twisted into a cruel smile, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. "You've come so far, little bird," he taunted, "but you cannot escape your fate." I felt a chill run down my spine, but I refused to back down. "You won't take my family," I shouted, my voice fierce. "I'll fight you." He laughed, a sound that sent shivers through my bones. "Fight me? You think you can fight the inevitable?" He took another step forward, the shadows swirling around him like a dark cloak. "You're just a child playing in a world you don't understand." With a surge of courage, I charged at him, knife raised high. "I won't let you hurt them," I screamed, my heart pounding in my chest. But just as I reached him, he raised a hand, and an unseen force slammed into me, sending me sprawling to the ground. Pain shot through my body as I gasped for breath, struggling to regain my footing. The dog barked fiercely, its instincts kicking in as it stood protectively beside me. "Foolish child," he sneered, his voice dripping with malice. "You cannot win against the darkness." I felt the shadows closing in around me, but I refused to give up. I scrambled to my feet, heart racing as I prepared to fight back. "I may be scared, but I won't let you take my family," I shouted, determination fueling my resolve. With the dog by my side, I faced the figure, ready to confront the darkness that threatened to consume everything I loved. I would fight for my parents, for my home, and for every moment of light that had ever filled my life. As I lunged forward again, I felt the energy surging through me, a fire ignited by love and fear. "You will not win," I cried, the knife glinting in the moonlight. In that moment, I realized that the true power lay not in the knife or in the fight, but in my unwavering determination to protect what was most precious to me. I was willing to face any darkness, to confront any fear, if it meant bringing my family back home. Were you able to guess what was coming? If you want to hear more chilling true stories like this one, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss a single spine-tingling episode of Nightmare Narratives.